My name is Ron Waxer, and on behalf of Lionel Berger and Howard Price from the Adult Education Committee, I'm very pleased to welcome you to the third inning of our Jews in Sports series. Tonight, we are honored to have father and son, Charles and Stephen Bronfman, join us for a discussion. Time does not permit an adequate introduction of these two fine gentlemen, but I must at least highlight a few points. Stephen Bronfman is a business executive and devoted philanthropist. As executive chairman of Claridge, he has spent more than 20 years guiding the firm's investment strategy and seeking out unique business opportunities both locally and globally. He is equally committed to environmental, cultural, and community causes, and with his wife Claudine, co-chairs the Claudine and Stephen Bronfman Family Foundation. He is also Chief Revenue Officer of the Liberal Party of Canada. And most important for this evening, Stephen is leading a group to bring Major League Baseball back to Montreal. Charles Bronfman definitely needs no introduction. His business and philanthropic accomplishments are way too many to mention. He has run companies such as Seagram's and Claridge, was the first chair of the United Jewish Communities, and co-founded Birthright Israel. He is a companion of the Order of Canada and has received honorary degrees from Hebrew University, McGill University, the University of Toronto, and Brandeis University, among others. And most important for this evening, Charles was the original owner of the Montreal Expos, and he brought Major League Baseball to Montreal in 1969. I have to say that I was at the home opener when the Expos beat the St. Louis Cardinals 8-7, and the city fell in love with Nos Amours, les Expos. Perhaps the best way to describe Charles is to use the words of Bud Selig, the 9th Commissioner of Major League Baseball, who writes in his recent book, For the Good of the Game, about the baseball owners that he worked with as follows. There were some remarkably good men in the group of owners, of course. I loved George Steinbrenner when he bought the Yankees from CBS in 1973. We had a great relationship from the very start. I helped introduce him to the owners, Jerry Hofberger, John Fetzer, and Dan Galbraith, who had helped me. And then he goes on to say, oh, Charles Bronfman too. The Expos owner was great. He encouraged me a lot early on. He was born wealthy because of his father's empire, which was built around Seagram spirits, but spent his time and his money in wise, caring ways. He's dedicated to so many social causes, one of the finest human beings I've ever known. Charles and Stephen, welcome to our series on Jews in Sports, and thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Well, congratulations on doing this series. I think it's great.
Thank you
for having us.
To get us started in conversation, Charles, please take us back to those days in the mid to late 1960s when you were approached by Jerry Snyder and Mayor Drapeau to become an owner. What kind of relationship did you have with Mayor Drapeau before the baseball opportunity came about? And did that help or hinder you becoming an owner?
I really had no relationship with the mayor before that. I knew Jerry Snyder. He called me, my wife and I were at a YPO meeting in Puerto Rico. And he called me up and he said, the mayor wants to do this baseball thing. 10 owners, $1 million. I said, sure. And my wife said to me, $1 million just like that. I said, don't worry, it'll never happen. And so we were listening to the news one night on CJAD in Montreal. And 10 o'clock news, and they said, now we hear the news and about baseball in Montreal. And I turned to her and I said, oh my God, now we're in the group. So my either knowing or not knowing Drapeau had no effect on anything.
So I understand that there was a group of about 10 original owners, and a number of them had pulled out. What made you stay?
I'll tell you, in the first place, I had been a baseball fan. My brother and I used to go to Delorme Downs, and we Sunday doubleheaders, take a 65 streetcar down there, and we pig out on hot dogs and Cokes and Cracker Jacks. And I knew all of the Dodgers before they were Dodgers. And so I knew that there was a feeling for baseball in Montreal. I also had always wanted to do something for my city, my province, and my country. And I also thought that Canada should be closer to the United States emotionally. So I thought this could do a lot of good. And I stayed in because I thought it was the right thing to do. I didn't do it to make any money, but I did it because I thought it would be break even, but something that would be terrific. And it was.
Did you, there was that fairly concentrated period of intense separatism, sort of in the mid 60s and then the 1970 with the War Measures Act. Did trying to make the French English inclusivity affect your decisions in any way? Was that also part of what you were thinking?
No, because we were already in 1969, but we did an interesting thing. What we did with season ticket holders is we put some francophones next to anglophones, next to Jews, so we tried to mix them up. Of course, when they all went to renew their tickets, everybody wanted to sit with their own kind, but we gave it a shot.
That would probably be very challenging to do today. Stephen, you were just a young boy when the Expos came to town.
I used my other laptop.
What are some of your early memories of the Expos? And maybe tell us who some of your favorites were. Do you remember back to those days?
Yeah, I was 5, and I have fond memories. I mean, what a great way for a young kid who loves sports to grow up. I mean, it was a dream. And you know, driving with Dad on the weekends over to the ballpark, we used to drive down Park Avenue to go to Jerry Park. And oftentimes on a Sunday, excuse me, Rabbi, because it's not kosher, but we would stop at Kentucky Fried Chicken and we'd pick up a bucket of chicken at noon and we'd go for batting practice and we'd sit there and we'd watch batting practice and we'd have some chicken. And, you know, it was great. My sister, Ellen, would come with us too when she was a little bit older. And it was a family, listen, baseball's a family sport. And it was definitely a family affair for all of us. And, you know, players, I mean, we loved all the players. Mac Jones, who used to call Dad Money. That was his nickname for Dad. And Rusty Staub, you know, I mean, they were all Bob Bailey and, you know, Ron Fairley. These were, you know, they were part of the family. It was a family game and they became our extended family. It was a wonderful, those were wonderful days.
Was it hard to get good seats in those days?
We had pretty good seats.
Yeah, pretty good seats. It's an unusual.
In fact, I want you to know one thing, Ron. My kids asked me whether the seats we had were free. And I said, well, that's a very interesting question. Let's define free.
It depends which way you look at it.
But what was nice was we sat normally, I mean, we sat in the stands. We had a box, but we were all mostly in the
Right.
stands.
How did Jerry Park become? It clearly was not a stadium meant for baseball. How did it become a baseball stadium?
It was a little junior ballpark. It
Right.
really was. And there were 2 media guys. I think Ian McDonald was one. And there's a guy from La Presse who was the other one. And Warren Giles, the president of the National League, was in town one day. And they took him out. There was a minor league ball game going on at Jerry Stadium. And they said, could this become a ballpark for Major League Baseball? And he said, yes, it could, because they showed him the sight lines and the amount of land available and so on. I knew nothing about it. And our whole thing that summer was we had no place to play. We looked at the Autostad, we looked at other places, and the city wasn't very interested in doing anything. And at one point, I remember NBC called me and they said, Mr. Bronfman, you realize that Buffalo is going to be having your franchise. And it was that close.
Wow. So what was that? How much time between that and opening day?
Well, from the time we got the franchise, let's see, that was 1968 in the fall. And then opening day was in April of the following year. We had to design the uniforms, we had to hire staff, we had to get players. We had to start with the minor leagues. It was a heck of a job, and my hat was off to our officials who did it all.
Wow. So tell us about opening day in New York in 1969 and how
I
you
was
were feeling.
sitting with Mayor Drapo, and he was very funny. There are planes going overhead. He said, "What are those planes going overhead?" And I said, "Well, you know, the airport's right near here, LaGuardia Airport." And he said, "Well, I'll tell you one thing. In Montreal, there won't be that kind of noise going on with airplanes going over." Okay. But it was, I mean, there were 47,000 people at Shea Stadium in New York that day. And they all stood up at attention for the playing of O Canada. And they had the band of the Collège Militaire Royal and Maureen Forrester, the great Canadian soprano, singing O Canada. Oh, tears are rolling down my face, I'll tell you.
Stephen, were you there?
I was not.
Okay.
He was there the next week at Sherry Park.
Yeah.
So they won that opener. Did you think they were going to go 162-0, or did you think
Well, you know,
just a lucky day?
you can't do that unless you win the first one. And that one was also an easy win, 11-10.
11-10.
Dan McGinn hit the first home run ever hit by an Expo.
Oh, you're
And he
good.
was the pitcher.
Yeah.
Pitcher. You're good with your trivia. So you mentioned something about developing the uniforms, and I see Jerry and a few other people are wearing this hat. The logo still remains one of the best-selling and most recognizable logos around. There's still lots of people wearing Expos hats. Who came up with the logo? And do you know how that happened? And for Stephen, what is going to be the logo of the new team?
Well,
Start
Dad,
with
you
you, Charles.
We hired a firm actually in Toronto, and darn it, I can't remember the man's name. He was he was a little guy. He was terrific. He was very creative, and he came in one day with two different designs. One of them was what you're wearing on your head, with the white uniform with the big red and blue stripes down the sides. And I said, "That's the one." And my colleagues are looking at me saying, "Are you crazy?" You know, the other one was a staid, normal baseball uniform. I said, "Oh, we got to do something different." And I remember when we hired Gene Mock, and I told Gene that we were going to use that hat. He said, "No, you're not going to. The players will never wear it," which meant I won't ever wear it. I said, "Gene, we're going to sell 1 million of those caps this summer." "Oh," he said, "what a nice cap."
Well, it was the first tricolor, multicolored hat.
Right.
Hat.
Maybe you can tell people what the emblem stands for.
Well, the emblem, the whole thing is Montreal. The E is for Expos, and the B is for baseball.
Yeah.
There used to be a debate where people were saying that it was actually CRB. That there was rumors, but not true.
Yeah, I thought that this might be a ball and a bat, but I guess it's open to the eye of the interpreter. Stephen, what are you thinking about for the Expos 2.0?
Expos 2.0 are not exactly at design phase, but you know, it's a new project, and we'll have to see. It's going to be very exciting.
Okay, we're going to come back to you on that. I want to invite people, if they have questions, to please put them into the chat, and I'll monitor it and try and address them. Charles, I have a question for you that comes out of a story you told in your book, Distilled, where you talked about the early Rusty Staub for Don Clendenin trade. And you said that Don Clendenin would not report to Houston because of Harry Walker's racism. It's especially relevant in these days of Black Lives Matter. Did you see much racism then, and did it change over time? And after you answer that, I have a couple of follow-up questions.
There is always cliquism, shall we call it. And I must say the black players stuck together, the Hispanic players stuck together, and the WASP players, are actually most of them were Catholics, they stuck together. There's a camaraderie. In fact, to me, one of the signs of a winning team is whether the clubhouse is a good clubhouse, whether the guys get along well. And you start having people disliking each other and actively disliking each other, you don't play well together. So there is always, I would say, anti-black thing. And now it's fascinating because there are very few black players in baseball anymore. They're mostly Hispanic and white.
African American is about 10%, just about.
Right. So you mentioned the cliques that stuck together. Did the Jews stick together as well, or one or two?
Too many Jews in baseball in those days.
There weren't very many. I can't remember. Did you ever have any on the Expos?
Yes, we had one named Steve Ratzer. Steve Ratzer was a left-handed pitcher. And to show you how young kids are wonderful, my stepson, Tony Cohen, was about 10 at the time. And we took him out to a exhibition game in West Palm Beach. And we said, Tony, we have this Jewish pitcher on our team. Isn't that great? And he said, yeah, it's wonderful. And the pitcher who stepped up to start was a tall black pitcher. And he turned around to his mother. He says, Mommy, is that Steve Ratzer? So the innocence of youth is, I wish to heck we could have that in that same innocence in our elderly years.
We had a Jewish coach, didn't we? Norm Sherry?
Yeah, but he didn't coach for us, did he? Yeah, he did. You know what? Yeah, you're right. Yeah. He helped Carter. We hired him specifically to help Carter learn how to catch.
We're going to come back to Gary Carter, but I'm just going to tell people who may not know, Norm Sherry is the catcher who turned Sandy Koufax into the greatest pitcher of all time. He told him to just let up a little bit as he was throwing his fastball. And letting up a little bit gave him perfect control and led him to the brilliant career.
And he had a brother who was also on the Dodgers.
Right.
Larry Sherry, who was a relief pitcher.
Right. But we're here to talk about the Expos, more important, and this issue about the racism that you brought up. How do you think you would react today to the protests that we're seeing from major leaguers in the different sports? And if maybe you, Stephen, because you hopefully will be an owner pretty soon, how you would respond to the players who might want not to play a game because of what's going on in the world?
Well, from a Jewish perspective, I mean, we all have to stand strong for ourselves because no one else is really going to stand strong for us, right? So I think it's really important that people in sport are taking a stand. I mean, Kaepernick started 4 or 5 years ago and was sort of laughed out of or shunned by football. I don't think that would happen today. I think things are progressing and the social issues are getting more and more front and center. You have very sort of racist, very divided America these days, and sport carries a lot of weight, and a lot of people watch, and a lot of people take it seriously. They're heroes to kids, and I think it's really important that they stand up for things that really matter to them deep down inside. I mean, they're athletes and they're entertainers, but number one, they're people.
Right. Charles, I'm going to ask you about free agency, which came about in 1975. And I think you quickly figured out that you didn't have the deep pockets of some of the other owners, particularly the Yankees and the Dodgers. And you felt that in order to make a successful team, you had to grow from within. And you led the development of one of the best farm systems ever. We can talk about Dawson and Cromartie and Valentine and all these guys. So tell us about that process and how
that was the best young outfield in baseball.
Absolutely.
Valentine, Dawson, Cromartie. Oh.
Yeah.
Ellis Valentine was probably the most talented player we had. It was such a shame. You remember he could throw from right field to home plate without a bounce.
Without a bounce.
It was amazing.
I think
the poor guy, he got drug habit.
Vlad Guerrero.
Yeah.
So how did that farm system develop?
Just very simply, when I came to the conclusion that this was the way life was going to be, I spoke to John McHale and I spoke to our president, I spoke to Hugh Hallward, our co-owner, and I said, fellas, this is what I think. And interesting, nobody knows this story, who really showed me that was a great pitcher for the Dodgers. And he was a free agent.
Sutton.
Yeah, Don Sutton. And Don Sutton came to Montreal, and I met him at the airport, and we had a chat. And I said, Don, we really love you in Montreal. And he said, Mr. Bronfman, there is no way I'll go to Montreal. I said, oh, how come? He said, there are two things, language and taxes. So I said, ooh, and Sutton was a nice guy. I happened to know him. So when he leveled with me that way, I said, well, that's Don Sutton's quick reply. That's going to be for an awful lot of people. And so I said, this is what we're going to have to do. We had a meeting at my apartment in Palm Beach of all our minor league people. And I made the announcement that by the end of that month, they're all going to see their pays increase, I think by 1/3 or 50%. It was an astonishing amount for them. It really wasn't that much money because we didn't spend much money on coaching staffs. I could never understand, Ron, how you'd have a development program and you'd have a manager on a Class A team making $30,000 a year. And I said to John McHale, John, we're trying to get these guys to be the best players they can in the sport. You're paying somebody 30, you should pay them 100,000. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a huge responsibility, and there's something we should be doing about it. So anyway, I said, fellas, this is the story. We're going to make you the most highly paid scouts, managers, everything in baseball. Now, there's one hitch to it. You either perform or you're gone. And they performed. Some of them went.
It certainly turned out an outstanding product for maybe a decade.
Yeah, they're great.
I just want to follow that up in terms of the revenue and the Don Sutton story. Your revenue came in Canadian dollars, and I guess almost all your expenses, salaries, had to be paid out in American dollars. So did you get any kind of deal from MLB or from the Canadian government?
Or the Quebec government.
Or the Quebec government?
The problem was that I think they all figured if they gave us a deal, what about somebody who comes to play solo for the Montreal Symphony Orchestra? Or what about an American who comes and plays hockey in Montreal? Or the hockey teams that come to Montreal? You know, so I asked, I went to Quebec City and spoke to Premier Bourassa, and I begged him. And I said, I even tried to make a deal that if at 80 cents, I said, we can handle it. But if it goes below 80 to the US dollar, then you should subsidize us. But if it goes over parity, we should give you something. And he wouldn't do it. And I'll never forget when we were selling the club, I called him. And I said, you remember that deal I asked you for on the stadium? He said, yeah. I said, give it to the new guys. I said, I understand why you couldn't give it to me. Mm-hmm. Give it to the new guys. He did.
He did?
Yeah. He gave them a, well, it was a little bit different by that time, but he gave them a break on the rent for sure.
Do you know what happens with the Canadiens now? Do they, same kind of story, or is it different?
I have no idea.
Stephen, do you know?
No, and that they're trying to get their taxes down, but on municipal taxes for the land. But I don't know.
So it really made it a challenge to compete, given the revenue.
It was awful, and don't forget they didn't have the kind of thing they have today, where there's a cap, in effect, a luxury tax, right, if you overspend, and the luxury tax money goes to the have-not teams. Right. Because I think when I left baseball, of the 30-odd teams, there must have been 10 for sale. Right. And don't forget, when I got into baseball, it was a sport. If you owned a club and you had a bad year, you'd lose $100,000. If you had a very bad year, you'd lose $200,000. When I left, if you had a bad year, it would cost you $10 million. and a very bad year cost you 20 million. And now, as Stephen can tell you, because I think he's looked at the numbers, it's much higher than that.
Mhm.
So I don't know what's happened to the world, but this whole money thing in sport it is what it is, but it's unfortunate.
Do you remember what the highest salary was on your team during your years?
It was Carter, $2 million.
$2 million. That's, I don't know what minimum, well, minimum now is about 600, I think, but there aren't too many players making that.
Oh.
Stephen, I want to come back to the issue of the Expos, which I firmly believe is going to happen. I promised my two grandsons that we're going to the first game. I hope it's going to happen soon. You're leading a group to bring the A team back to Montreal. And we know that there have been a lot of negotiations with Stuart Steinberg, current owner of the Rays, to make you a minority owner. Can you give us any insight into the state of the negotiations and what you think the chances are of bringing the team back?
Yeah, I mean, we've been working Stu Sternberg, who's a good Jewish boy from Westchester, Goldman Sachs guy, who's a passionate baseball fan. He's owned the Rays for close, I think, about 15 years now. And listen, he's in a situation where he's a great operator. They have a first-rate, first-place baseball team, and they don't draw. And they don't draw. What he didn't realize, I guess, getting in there, is that folks in Tampa, they're pretty good with television numbers, but people just don't go to the stadium. Summertime is so hot. People just go to work and they want to sit down at home with a beer and they're beer cozy and sit on their couch and watch a ball game, but they don't want to go out. And so what he decided was he's having a tough time making work. He doesn't want to sell the team. He doesn't want to move the team, but he's got to figure something out. And so we started having discussions. And he had this proposal of saying, what would you think of the idea of a sister city concept? And at first it's a tough one to kind of get your arms around. And then the more you spend time thinking about it, the more, you know, it's a very interesting proposal. And so Stuart, who's on the executive at Major League Baseball, has had ongoing discussions with the commissioner, with Selig originally, and of course Bob Manfred, who Manfred was the one who's now become the champion of this within baseball owners, and they gave us the green light last year to go ahead to give it a full run through. We're getting down to the short strokes, and I think we got a little slowed down by COVID, obviously 4 to 6 months probably. But this is the time. So we'll know in the next, short while whether or not this is going to fly, but I think it will.
So hopefully you'll put out a call for season tickets soon so you can get some little bit of cash to play with. You'll get a lot of people submitting, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's going to be really exciting. And
really
we have wonderful plans, lovely little downtown stadium, something really community-based, and we're very excited. We've been working behind the scenes for years now. I'm glad it's not my full-time job, but enjoying it. And again, like Dad, it's for me, it's more community-minded. It's bringing the love of sport, and Montreal has great fans. Bringing sort of the summertime sport back to the city. I believe greatly in the city and in the province and the country. I think it'd do amazing things for the rivalry of Montreal-Toronto, which is always hot on the hockey arena. It was never that great on the baseball side, obviously, because we were in different leagues. You had something called the Pearson Cup, but I don't think anyone on your call really knows much about the Pearson Cup. But imagine if we're all in the American League East together. I mean, it would be phenomenal.
So what will the name be if that sort of merger or whatever you call it happens? Tampa will play their games in Montreal.
Stay tuned, and you will find it.
Okay, we're waiting with anticipation. So you brought up the stadium, and before I ask how you're going to fund it, this is a question for both of you. Do you think that the Expos would still be in Montreal if you had a proper stadium with a roof that worked?
Yes.
You do, and
yes.
Do you sort of call out the mayor for that, Mayor Drapeau?
One time when Barassa had been out, and then he was running again for Premier of Quebec. And I called him and I said, Robert, I know you're going to win. So what you'll do, please, first day you're back in office, you will take some very well-placed sticks of dynamite. You'll stick it under the big O and you'll blow it all to hell. Because if you don't, I said, that thing is going to be a millstone around the neck of the people of this province forever. It is a horror. It's just a horror story. And his answer, politicians are wonderful. He said, Charles, I agree with you economically, but politically I can't handle it. I said, what do you mean politically? The things that, anyway, that was the story.
Yeah, shame.
What an awful place to play baseball.
Yeah,
Everything was wrong with it.
not such a great place to watch it either.
Well, that's what I meant by playing,
Yeah.
watching. Because,
Well,
you know, it was all slanted the wrong way.
Right.
Baseball has to be slanted this way so you can feel close to it. It's an intimate game. Football, you play in yards. Baseball, you play in feet. There's a hell of a difference. So you want to be intimate. And the action is the pitcher and the batter. And I've always likened the contest between the pitcher and the batter as caveman days. The guy with a stone and the guy with a stick.
Right.
And that's the crude but realistic war that's going on between those two players. And it's beautiful to watch, but you've got to be able to watch. You got to be in there. And I think what Stephen's group wants to do is build that kind of stadium.
Yeah, I agree with Dad about the stadium itself, but you know, we've been having these spring training games every year, and the Blue Jays come in right before the season starts. And last year, Larry Walker was in. I think we were doing something to honor him getting into the Hall of Fame, and I was chatting with Larry, and he had a bit of a different view of why there's no baseball. He felt that the strike in '94 was what really crushed baseball in Montreal. He felt that team was so good that he said we not only would have won a championship in '94, but he said we had at least one other championship in that group of players. And after the strike was over, I mean, the ownership started to kind of fire sale, broke up that whole team. And Larry really felt that it was the strike that sort of put the nail in the coffin for Montreal.
Yeah. So I'm using that as a segue. I'm going to go back to the year 1981. I know you're starting to maybe feel a bit uncomfortable. There was a strike in the middle of that year, and then the champions of the first and second part of the season played off for the division title, and the winners of the East played the winners of the West. Well, for people who don't know, the Expos won the second half, and then they beat the Phillies to advance to the conference finals against the Dodgers. The 5-game series was tied at 2 apiece, and the final game was played in Montreal on the 19th of October, a Monday. I remember exactly where I was, after a snow out, believe it or not, the day before. In a brilliantly pitched game, the Expos manager at the time, who had just replaced Dick Williams, Jim Fanning, decided to bring in the great Expos starter, but not reliever, Steve Rogers. Tell us what happened and describe your feelings.
There was a player named Monday, Rick Monday, and he took Steve Rogers' pitch, which I thought was low and inside. I thought it was a good pitch, and he hit it over the right field fence. And that was that, and we lost. And I was just totally destroyed. Mm-hmm. And Sean McHale came to me afterwards. He said, you know, you don't get this kind of opportunity very often.
Right.
And when you miss it, it really, really hurts. Yeah. And boy, did it ever.
They never got to the playoffs again, did they?
No.
I remember it was a very, very quiet drive back home.
Right. Did you drive back with your dad?
Yeah, sure.
Wow.
Not much to say. Not much to say.
Yeah, that was a tough time. Okay, so a little bit of a more upbeat now. I'm just going to ask you to, both of you guys, to respond. I'm going to throw some names out, and I want to hear your feelings. So I have a bunch of them written. I'll pick the first one, Tim Raines.
Tim Raines, unfortunately was on drugs. And had he not been on drugs the first year that he was with us, we would have won. And it was sad. But he was a hell of a player, though.
And by drugs, you don't mean performance enhancing drugs.
I do mean performance enhancing drugs. And,
was he?
which
Okay.
was something, by the way, that was quite prevalent in those days with the players. I had no idea that there was drugs going on. None. I don't know if our top management knew about it. I have no idea, but I didn't know. And it came as a great shock to me that Raines was on the stuff, as they call it, cocaine.
Right.
When he got off cocaine, he became a terrific player.
Yeah, well, Hall of Famer. How about Gary Carter?
Gary Carter and I
Another
had
Hall of Famer.
Yeah, we had our problems because the players on the team did not like Carter very much, and he thought that he had to carry the whole load. And so you get into a situation at the bottom of the ninth inning, and you're down a couple of runs, and there are a couple of guys on base, and all Carter has to do is hit the ball to the right side, instead of which he gets into a double play because he's trying to hit the ball out of the park and be the hero. And so I just thought he was not a team player. And then you see, and he became very big with the Mets,
right?
Because they had other star players. So he didn't have to carry the whole load. With us, he did, or he thought he did.
Right. How about, I'm going to ask you one more before we bring in the rabbi as our relief pitcher. Rusty Staub. You can't talk about the Expos without talking about Le Grand Orange.
Le Grand Orange is a terrific player. You know, one day he and I were playing, you know, he just passed away this past winter.
Yeah.
And he lived in West Palm Beach. And I saw him actually, almost ran him over at a restaurant earlier that season. Were you there, Steve?
No, but I remember you telling me the story.
Anyway, Rusty, we were just having a game of catch, and he had a great, he would throw overhead. He wasn't just winging the ball. And I said, Rusty, why do you do that all the time? We're just having a friendly little catch. And he, Charles, when I'm playing right field, I've got to know who's on base, how fast they are, and where I'm going to throw the ball before the ball is even hit. So I figure that if I'm going to try to figure out how to throw it, that's another thing I don't need to be bothering me. So I always throw the ball exactly the same way. Logical.
Yeah.
Not many people had the sense of how to handle things like he did. He was a terrific player.
He had a very odd way of throwing. You know,
Ron, that's a very good segue into a quick story that I want to tell about throwing the ball. You know, when Toronto got into the World Series for the first time, the ownership called up Dad and asked him if he would throw out the first pitch in a World Series game ever to be played in Canada. And so Dad was honored, and he told me, and I was horrified. So we were in the same office building. I went downstairs. I paced off 60 feet, 6 inches in our ballroom, and I put tape there, and I brought mitts to the office for a week straight. I said, Dad, you are not going to embarrass me, and we're going to throw for 5 minutes every day this week, and you're going to get up there, and you're going to throw a BB into the catcher's mitt, which he did.
That's great. A lot better than Dr. Fauci, who threw it about 4 feet.
Yeah.
You know, Rusty Staub is one of only 4 players to have hit a home run before the age of 20 and after the age of 40.
Wow. Who are the others?
Ty Cobb.
Yeah.
Gary Sheffield.
Gary Sheffield. Wow.
And Alex Rodriguez.
Wow.
Huh.
No, good group of players.
Yeah.
And on that note, before Howie Price comes in to do the final wrap up, I'm going to bring in at the 7th inning stretch, Rabbi Grover, who's going to take it away with perhaps a couple of other questions. I personally want to just thank you, Stephen and Charles, very, very much for taking the time to do this with us.
Well, thank you, Ron. Thank you for your good questions and your good humor.
And
When you
Rabbi,
talk baseball.
over to you.
I want to thank you too. This was fascinating. And Ron, you are a great, great interviewer. You really prepped for this. I am impressed. But I said to Ron when I heard that we were organizing tonight, you can't have these two groundbreaking figures in Jewish philanthropy, and it's a shul program, and we don't ask them one question about the world of Jewish philanthropy today. So Ron, I appreciate you letting me sneak in a couple of questions here at the end. I really am curious for your thoughts about the Jewish community and how it should be setting philanthropic priorities nowadays, and whether your sense of what those priorities might be have changed, maybe due to COVID, and the challenges that Birthright is going to have operating in this environment, particularly Charles, and whether you think that local fundraising in the Jewish community should be the priority now over needs in Israel.
Well, one of the things that keeps us together as a people has been the tradition of giving. It was in the Bible, and it's in our culture, has been forever. So giving, the 10% tithe that it used to be, which is no longer viable, but people do give. And I think they give as a community to become a community, to stay a community. And one of the things that tied us all in North America, and particularly in Canada, as we're talking to Toronto people, to Israel, was the fact that we did give so much and we did help. And we were part emotionally of the development of dear Israel. Today, Israel is a very wealthy country, very wealthy. And it's probably, its per capita income is probably very close to Canada's per capita income. And one might say that, well, the government in Israel has to look after some of the social needs that our government in Canada looks after for us, which still means that the community is bereft of certain things that it should have. There are still people who starve in Montreal and Toronto who live below the poverty line. There's the COVID problem. I think that what will happen, and it has been happening, is that people will give to specific causes in Israel, whether it's one of the universities, or whether it's for ORT, or whether it's for agriculture, or for water development and so on. That kind of thing will go on. I don't think that the Jewish Agency will receive nearly as much, and it hasn't over the years. And I think we will concentrate more on our own community, but at the same time, having our communities close, twin with communities as has happened in Israel. That's my own thinking. Steve?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Obviously, these past years and this past year, the needs at home far outweigh the needs in Israel, but the connection is always, deep and everlasting. I think that the fundraising that's going on, most of those funds are really needed locally. I mean, we do have a twin city program with Montreal. I don't know who Toronto is, but we're with down the south.
Beersheba.
Yeah, Beersheba. And, I think it's really important to keep those ties. We're working on a large campaign this year, which is almost a 2-year campaign, at really trying to deal with the poverty issues, deal with the COVID issues, deal with people's jobs and their livelihoods, and
local, all local.
Yeah, it really is, and it's interesting to hear Dad speak, because he in prior years, quite a while back, he used to get a little bit upset that the community was not giving enough to Israel, and boy, have things changed. I mean, Israel is a very rich community, and we have to really take a look at issues at home and fix them before we can do too much else.
And I think there's one other really overarching problem, and that is the shocking rise of anti-Semitism, which is now worldwide. And I think that we will see more and more organizations and people getting together to fight anti-Semitism, which is one of the terrible diseases that exists in our world.
Stephen, you agree with that anti-Semitism here locally should remain a priority for the Jewish community, fighting anti-Semitism?
100%, 100%. We're in a time now where just general racism, I mean, it's off the charts, and we all have to stand strong, and we have to take care of each other, but we have to stand, and we have to educate as well. I think, you know, at the center of any really strong city or strong community is a strong Jewish community, because people learn from the Jews. They learn through the adversity and the history, what we've been through, and you know, we have so much to learn, but we have so much to learn from others and to teach others. So I think that, you know, I think communities through these difficult times really have to come together and share and take care of one another, but you got to take care of yourselves first.
Are you worried about assimilation?
Well, it's an interesting question. I mean, I married out of the faith, but we did a conversion project together, and it was wonderful. It was very bonding and wonderful. I have 4 wonderful kids, and we've had 3, we've had 2, a bar mitzvah, a bat mitzvah. We have another bat mitzvah coming that COVID has thankfully pushed aside till next year. But you know, no, I'm not. I mean, in Canada, I think the Canadian communities are different than maybe in America, but listen, the Jewish tradition and the Jewish roots are so strong. So I don't.
Charles,
Yes, sir.
is there a mitzvah in the Torah, a mitzvah in Judaism that you find particularly meaningful for you and powerful in your family?
Well, for me, it's been birthright, of course. That's been my mitzvah.
Right.
It's also been my machaya. It's been a lot of things. I think we need more birthrights. So the more, look, let me put it this way. I've always felt that there were 2 great Jewish societies, one in Israel, one in North America. I did not know at the time when I had that genealogical thought that about the Russian community, but just leave it for the moment, Israel and North America. It always occurred to me that our forebears went through holy hell in order for us to be basking in the joys of living in Canada. And that we could easily say we're okay, and the Israelis could say we're okay. And I think we'd all go down the tubes, because I believe in united we stand, divided we fall. So somehow or other, we need to have a great emphasis on empathy between Israelis and diaspora people of whatever Jewish thought stream they may be. And unless that happens these days, we're going to find ourselves drifting off and drifting off and drifting off. And I think that the way that the Jewish community will remain Jewish is we'll have Jews who want to be Jews, not Jews just because they're born Jews, and have connections, emotional connections with Israelis. And as the technology becomes even better and better, look, we're here tonight on Zoom, and Lord knows how many conferences you've had on Zoom, Rabbi, with Israelis or with others in other communities. With today's technology and tomorrow's technology, we can be one people. We're destined to be one people. We have to be one people.
And that's probably one of the most powerful parts of Birthright is the Mifgashim program, where we have, you know, kids from the army that join the buses, and they can start making relationships and learning from each other.
Yeah, I'm hoping Birthright doesn't take too long of a hiatus here with all the travel restrictions, and that it is so powerful. And thank you both. You are leaders in baseball, but for me, you're my Jewish heroes for other reasons. And I hope God blesses you with many more opportunities to give and to lead by example for all of us.
Thank you, and continued good fortune in your own shul and your work in Toronto.
Thank you. Howard,
Shana Tova.
thank you.
Yeah, I just want to thank Charles and Stephen for this superb discussion. And we wish you every luck in bringing Major League Baseball back to Montreal. I also want to thank our excellent sportcaster, Ron DeLaxer, who in his spare time is a pediatric rheumatologist at St. Kitts Hospital. We want to remind everybody about the second half of the doubleheader, Paul Godfrey on September 16th, speaking on his role in bringing Major League Baseball to Toronto and his role as CEO of the Blue Jays. We want to wish everybody a Shana Tova.
Shana Tova.
And just as a small, I want to say one thing. Maybe I was supposed to mention this before, Ron. We were thinking, what can we do to thank you that would be meaningful for you? And we've created at our synagogue an award that we're going to call the Bronfman Israel Experience Award in honor of tonight. And we're going to collect funds. Actually, it's been collected already to help since we have no birthright. There are some kids who are going to Israel for the year, participating in some experiential learning, and we're going to use this fund to help support them. I thought that might be meaningful for both of you.
That's very, very kind of you.
Beautiful.
I guess it's time to say shalom.
Shalom. Thanks
shalom.
again.
Shalom.
Like the Expos openers, we've got another win. Thanks very much to both of you, and thanks to everybody for attending.
Well, thank you, Ron.
Thanks, guys.
Safe travels.
That was great.
Very nice. Thanks, Dad.
Night, Steve.
Bye.
Night. Laila Tov.